The desert did not whisper, only waited. Dust hovered in the blue heat like breath held too long, and the bones of old scrub cedar groaned beneath the weight of waiting rain. Clara DeWitt had long since ceased fearing silence. It clung to her like a second skin now, like the memory of her husband's last gasp on the porch 3 winters ago, when a fevered bullet did what the war could not. She had buried William beneath the cottonwood by the river, built fences by herself, paid her ranch hands on time, and outstared the men from the railroad every month since. But today it wasn't a man from the railroad who rode up over the rise. She'd known that figure in silhouette once, long before the ache that hardened in her chest. Long before his name had become a dull throb she pressed down like a bruise that would not fade. Even at this distance she recognized the slope of his shoulders and the way he rode, as if born to the saddle, but still wary of it. Luke Calder. Once he had ridden for the Union, scouting back trails and cutting lines through the tall grass. After the war, he'd vanished into the spaces men go when peace tastes like gunmetal and ghosts. Rumor had him working with the railroad now, not just a scout, but a man they sent when papers didn't sway the living and muscle didn't move the dead. Clara stepped off the porch before he reached the gate, hands loose by her side, skirt lifting in the breeze. She wore no corset, no petticoats, just the rough linen of work clothes and the quiet kind of defiance that did not need a voice. Luke reined in slow, hat pulled low over his eyes. "You still got a healer in town?" "I am the healer," she said. He dismounted with a wince, and only then did she see the blood, dark and crusted at his side. He caught the saddle horn too long, his legs near buckling when his boots hit dirt. Clara didn't move to help him. "You're a fool if you think I'm going to patch you up, just 'cause you bleed like the rest of us." He smiled at that, just the corner of his mouth lifting beneath a 3-day beard. "I didn't come here for forgiveness, Clara. Just a steady hand and a quiet place to bleed." She exhaled through her nose, and she turned on her heel. "If you die on my floor, I'll bury you by the outhouse," she muttered. The cabin behind the main house had once been a smokehouse, long before Clara needed a space for more than meat and fire. Now it served as her apothecary, her sanctuary, and on rare occasion, a place for tending wounds that ran deeper than the skin. Luke's boots left blood-dark smudges on the floorboards as he staggered inside. The smell of sage and tallow filled the air, cut with the sweet rot of drying roots and summer herbs strung from the rafters. "Shirt off," Clara said, already lighting the lamp. He didn't speak, just unbuckled the gun belt with the slowness of a man who'd lived too long with pain and knew exactly how much effort he had left. The shirt followed, stuck to the wound. She watched him grit his teeth as he peeled it away, revealing a gash torn just below the ribs, long, shallow, and angry. A bullet had grazed him, not torn through. Still, it needed cleaning. She fetched a basin and cloth. The lamplight caught the planes of his torso, leaner than she'd remember, all sinewed and tension. A scar crossed one shoulder, old and pale, another down his right side, a map of a man carved by every place he'd been and everything he'd survived. "Still breathing, then," she murmured. "Barely," he rasped. "Still pretty as a snakebite, Clara." She met his eyes for a moment, something long buried pressed up between them like heat from the floor. She pressed the cloth to the wound and he hissed, head tipping back. "Who did this?" she asked. "Couple of boys with more courage than sense. Didn't like the way I asked questions." "What kind of questions?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I don't want them here," she said. He turned his face toward her, eyes dark and unreadable. "I ain't here for them." She dipped the cloth again. Why then? Why now? Luke didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch until the storm outside began to rumble low across the plains. Then, quietly, "You're the only place I ever came back to in my mind." Clara paused. His voice wasn't smooth. It was rough, like rawhide against stone. But there was something behind it. Not apology, but something harder. Truth. She straightened, pressing a final piece of linen to the wound and winding it snug with a strip of cotton. Her fingers brushed his skin and his breath caught. It was a small thing, a moment of skin on skin, but it sent a shiver up her spine that had nothing to do with the air. "I should let you rest," she said. But she didn't move. Neither did he. The storm came in full by nightfall, with a wind that shook the cedar bones of the cabin, and rain that hissed through the chinks in the roof like whispered curses. Clara stood by the narrow window, arms folded tight, as thunder cracked over the plains. Behind her, Luke lay stretched on the cot she hadn't meant to offer, shirtless and half-shadowed in lamplight. The wound was cleaned and bound, but something raw lingered in the air, unspoken, electric. "You used to come in from the fields like that," she said quietly, not turning. "Covered in blood or dirt, with that look like you'd stared down hell and didn't flinch." Luke's voice was hoarse. "And you'd curse me for tracking it in." She turned then, slow, eyes narrowing. "I still should." His mouth twitched, but the humor died quickly, replaced by something else. "You were the only thing that made sense after the war. I didn't come back because I thought I deserved anything. I came because not coming hurt worse." She stepped forward. Her bare feet made no sound on the wood, and the air between them shifted. "You don't get to speak to me about hurt," Luke called her. "You left me with nothing but a ring I never wore, and a name that dried up in my mouth." He sat up, winced, and then braced himself with one arm. "And yet you stitched me back together like I was worth the needle." She moved without thinking, knees straddling the edge of the cot, her hands on either side of him. "You think one act of mercy wipes out years?" "No," he said, voice low. "But I think the way you're looking at me right now says maybe you still care." Silence pressed down, filled only by the thrum of rain. Clara's breath came hard. Her palms flattened against the wall behind his shoulders, caging him. His skin radiated heat, raw, wounded, alive. She could feel the beat of his heart like a drum. He didn't touch her, didn't move, only waited. "I should hate you," she whispered. "You do?" But when her mouth met his, it wasn't hate that moved between them. It was something older, wilder, forged in too many years of silence and sweat and unsaid words. She kissed him like she meant to forget, and he answered like he never had. Clothes came away in pieces, not torn, not rushed, but undone like a prayer unraveling in reverse. Her hands mapped the scars she hadn't touched in years. His fingers slid up her back, reverent and rough. When they moved together, it wasn't sweet. It was stormlight and dry grass, the sharp bite of desperation buried beneath longing. She felt every year between them break like dry branches. And when they came undone, it was not with gentleness, but with a sound that split the dark. Afterward, they lay still. The storm passed. Clara's head rested on his chest, breath slowly easing. Luke's arm curled beneath her, fingers tangled in the ends of her hair. He didn't ask for tomorrow. She didn't promise one. Clara's breath came shallow, tight against her ribs. The storm outside battered the walls like a warning, but she didn't move, didn't blink. Luke stood before her, bare and bound, broken open by something neither bullet nor time could wound. She stepped closer. Her fingers slid to his bandaged side, but not for healing this time. No, this was something older, a memory housed in flesh, a promise they'd never spoken, but had written once in breath and sweat beneath the cottonwoods, before he left, before everything hardened. She leaned in, just enough to feel the heat of him. The space between them pulsed, and then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful. It was a demand, a reckoning, a reclaiming. Luke groaned low in his throat and caught her by the waist, pulling her flush despite the pain that flared in his ribs. She didn't care. He didn't either. Their mouths met again, rough, searching, wild with the years that had starved them of this. Her hands moved under his arms, fingers trailing down the ridges of his back. She pushed him toward the cot, the backs of his knees hitting it as he sat. She straddled him without a word. "God, Clara," he rasped. She kissed the corner of his mouth, his jaw, his throat. Her hands were in his hair, tugging his head back so she could taste every inch of skin she'd once known by heart. He trembled beneath her, his breath ragged and rising, even as she moved over him like a storm of her own. "You want to feel sorry for leaving?" she whispered against his throat. "Then take me like you mean it, like you never should have gone." He growled low, a sound born of guilt and hunger, and his hands found her skirts, bunching the fabric at her hips. Thunder cracked and lightning flared, silhouetting them against the window, man and woman caught between ruin and resurrection. Her bodice came undone one tie at a time, his hands greedy and reverent. Her breasts spilled into his palms, nipples already peaked from want. He took one in his mouth and she arched, her fingers tangling in his hair. She ground against him, felt him stiff and hard beneath the thin cloth of his trousers. He gasped her name. She bit his earlobe. "Don't stop," she said. "Don't you dare stop." Luke's breath came hard and hot against her skin. The pain in his side was nothing now, lost beneath the agony of need. His hands gripped her hips like he could anchor himself to her and not drift back into the cold. She shifted atop, finding him through the layers of cloth, and he shuddered. "Tell me." His words hung in the air. She slid off his lap and tugged at his belt. The leather came free with a hiss. Her fingers worked quickly, fiercely, and soon his trousers were down past his hips, her eyes catching on the sharp lines of muscle, the swell of him, glorious. "You want me to say it?" she asked, voice like velvet dragged against iron. He nodded once, breathless. "I've ached for you," she said, "every year, every cold night, every time I touched myself and wanted to forget your name." He growled, hands fisting in the cotton of her skirts, pulling them up until the bare, damp heat of her straddled him again. "Clara." She sank down on him in one smooth, defiant movement. They both gasped. She didn't wait. She rocked against him with slow, grinding hips, watching his face twist in pain and pleasure and something deeper. Her hands braced on his shoulders, nails digging in as she rode him through the ache. "God, you feel the same," she whispered. "No, you feel better. You feel like mine." "I always was," he said, voice hoarse. He thrust up into her and she cried out, letting the sound break through the thunder outside. The rhythm built, harder, faster, until the air around them trembled, thick with sweat and desperation. Their mouths met again, sloppy, frantic, tongues tangling in a kiss that was closer to confession. "I wanted to die every time I thought of you alone," he gasped, panting into her neck. "Then live for this," she said. "Live for me." Her body began to tremble. The release built sharp and fast, the coil inside her snapping with a cry she didn't try to hide. She clenched around him, dragging him over the edge with her, his shout lost in her skin as he clutched her tight and buried himself against her. They stayed there, breathing each other's air. Outside, the storm began to wane. Inside, something steadier took root. She pressed her forehead to his. "You stay this time," she said. Luke smiled, and Clara knew he was finally home.